Hello. How is everybody? So project management's a big, big thing. How many people know what project management is? Okay. You know what it's not? Okay. John and I were talking, and a crash course would take about 80 hours, like 2 weeks of class work and figuring out, and that's to scratch the surface of what we're doing. So what I decided to do is have a little fun with project management proverbs and then hit some highlights. Basically the things that bite us in projects, not necessarily methodology, because louder, yes, I can do that. So if you guys grab the piece of paper that you had, I have a mentor. His name's Charles Kemper. He's from Minnesota. Great guy. He actually made these up, these project management proverbs. And I'm going to read them through because they're pretty funny and they're really true. So you can't produce a baby in 1 month by putting 9 women on the job, right? That just doesn't work. So that gets towards resources and understanding who you have working for you. I worked for Guidant Corporation before I came out here, and they invented the first implantable defibrillator. And the doctor that invented that, actually, this is a quote from him: "The bumps in the road are not the bumps, they're the road." So I think you don't plan a project and know everything's going to go smoothly, because the reality is it never will, no matter what you do, right? The most valuable word in a project manager's vocabulary is no. So usually you come up with a scope, right? We're going to do this thing. It consists of A, B, and C. And then people start poking you from every angle, saying, we want F, and I want G, and I want Z. And when you do that, things get messy. They cost more. They take longer time. And then the people who wanted you to do the project in the first place aren't happy. The more ridiculous a deadline, the more expensive it is to try and meet. So a big thing that I tell my people is we have to live in reality. So if we said we're going to get something done in December, and things come up and plans change, we're not going to spend 3 months pretending it's going to get done in December. It's stressful for everybody, and everybody knows it's a lie. So live in reality is a big thing. Having too few people on a project means you can't solve the problems. Too many people can create more problems than can be solved. Which we've all been in a room with people, and there's 10 people, and there's probably 3 people, and it takes 3 months instead of 3 hours. That's another one. Frozen requirements and the abominable snowman are alike. Both are myths, and both melt when sufficient heat is applied. So that's true. It's a good one. What you don't know does hurt you. So the things that end up biting me is I ask somebody about a specific task or something, and they tell me the answer, but then they forget to add on all the other stuff that's going to come hit us in a week or two. So it's really important in my job to ask the right questions, not just ask questions. And then there's different people too, so this is very important. Some people feed you information. So if I give somebody a task, they're going to go do it. They'll come back right away. I want to ask them. They'll say, I did this, and this happened, so I'm going to go try these 2 other things. And then there's the people who you give them the task, and you have to go and pull things out of them like crazy. And one's easier than the other. I'll let you figure that one out. The conditions associated with a promise are forgotten, but the promise is remembered. So telling people, our project sponsors, the people who really own all of this information, telling them it's living in reality and not promising things that you know you can't deliver on. And believe it or not, that's quite the problem in both organizations that I've worked in. A big one for me is under-promise and over-deliver. So right now, the way our management structure works is we have these really tight deadlines that we can't meet. But those are the deadlines we always communicate. What I'm trying to do is create a culture where we plan appropriately and we have excess time, so we can say to all the upper-ups, right, that we're going to be done in December, but hey, it's October, guess what, we're done. That's a much better message to send them. So, yeah, a user will tell you anything you ask about and nothing more. And that kind of goes back to that push-pull that people have, you know, how you get the information out of them. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So this is a big thing in the medical device company, right? If you do anything, if it's not documented, I don't care how many people are in a room that say, yeah, we did that, it didn't happen. The FDA, the people who will approve medical devices to go out into the hospitals, everything has to be documented. The company I'm in now, it's a really small company. I came from a huge company to this small company, and everything's paper. We pass folders around, so it's very, very challenging. Things get lost all the time. So documentation is a big challenge for us right now. So, if a project is allowed to change freely, the rate of change quickly exceeds the rate of progress. So it's really, really important when you start out that scope that, you know, it's going to have A, B, and C, to keep that on lockdown unless there is a huge reason to change it, because that's when that year-long project becomes 5, 6 years, and it costs 3 times as much as it should have. So those were the fun project management proverbs. So a definition of a project: it's a temporary activity designed to produce a product, a service, or result. So it has a start, it has an end, and it produces something. So throw out some things from life that are projects. Because almost everything's a project if you think about it. Anybody got any? Yeah? A class, right? Getting dressed, right? And brushing your teeth. Everything's a project. All right, so a project manager's most useful tools. There's a billion different tools to use. Work packages, does anybody know what that means? I wouldn't expect so, it's kind of a weird term. So basically what you do is if we know we have to do a project, we have to figure out what amount of work needs to be done and what that work is. And instead of having it in one big box, you break it down into pieces. And you don't want to break it down too far because you want to be able to track to whatever those packages are. So getting dressed, you need your shirt, you need your pants, you need your boots. So we wouldn't wrap that into one package, it would be 3 different ones. So we'd manage the shirt, we'd manage the pants, we'd manage your boots. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So the different phases of a project. So there's an idea, then we have to plan, then we do, and then we end. So if you kind of look at that terminology, those aren't necessarily the official terms, but that's really what they mean. So in daily life, which ones do we usually not do? Huh? Plan, yeah. So this happens to me all the time because I do it in life. But you go to do something at home like shelves or something, and how many times are you going to go to Home Depot? Once, but how many times do you go? Like 3 or 4. And it's supposed to just take Saturday, but it takes Sunday, Monday, and then the next 3 weekends. And usually it's because, for me at least, I didn't plan. I didn't sit down and really write out and draw out and design what I need to do. I had an idea and then I did it. And I think we probably all do that. Scheduling, so it's super, super important, right, to say who's going to do what, here's the task, they're assigned to it. Because if something doesn't have an owner, who owns it? Nobody. And I see this a lot too, where you take a task and you'll say, you know, John and Bob own that task. Who owns that task? None of them. Neither one. It's usually, if there's not a single owner, it usually isn't owned. Risk management, so that's the idea of, okay, we're going to start here, we're going to end here. Let's walk through and figure out what bad things can happen. And I'm going to adjust that. It's not just bad things, it's opportunities too. So like an opportunity, a risk that's an opportunity is, the FDA usually takes 6 months to review what we submit to them. What would be the opportunity there, or the risk there?
Not getting approved.
But that it takes them a shorter amount of time. Then we can get to market faster, we can get cash flowing faster. But other risks are employees leaving, right? So we were scheduled out, and we know it's going to take 6 months, and we got 6 employees, 4 of them get really mad and take off. So we need to plan for that. So that's whether you got 3 people lined up who are looking for jobs and you're interviewing them. You're basically trying to mitigate whatever damage can happen if that risk is realized. And again, when we do that, it's called a risk register. So we'll just write down like an Excel file, you know, what if so-and-so leaves? This person's going to own that, and this is what we're going to do in case that happens. Am I doing on time? Okay, I'm good on time. So a project manager's worst enemies. First one's assumptions, and I was going to actually bring stuff in, but I forgot it in my car. So there's a big chunk of concrete that I have on my desk. And people ask about it all the time because it's weird that I have a big chunk of concrete on my desk. And I tell them it's my assumption concrete. So we built 3 houses in the past, and we started on it was an okay builder, they did a decent job. And in the basement, they had one of those, it's called an S-pipe. It's something to keep the sewer gas out in the shower. It was already in the floor, already done. So when I finished the basement, I didn't have to mess with that. And we went with a nicer builder, and I assumed they did the same thing. So you see where this is going. So I got the sheetrock done, I got the painting done, the trim's in, fireplaces installed, gas lines on, everything's done except for the carpet. And it stinks when I walk down there. It was horrible. So I called the builder and I said, you put that S-pipe in, right? And they're like, oh no, we don't do that. So I spent the next probably week and a half. I had to get like a huge concrete saw. I had to buy a $100 diamond blade, and I had to cut in the floor to find where the pipe was so I could actually install one. So it was like $300. It was like a week worth of my time. Back then I didn't shave my head, so I came up, and sheetrock dust is horrible. Concrete dust is even worse. I was completely white. So if I wouldn't have assumed that, if I just would have verified the assumption that I had, I wouldn't have had to do that. That was painful. So let's see the other one here. Quality, this is another one. Poor quality always bites you, no matter what. To take 3 months to do something that you thought would take 3 weeks, but do it right, makes a lot more sense, and it saves thousands and millions of dollars in some companies if you just stop and do it right. So in the same basement, this was a painful basement, by the way, I ordered the trim from the people who installed it when we built the house. So it'd be the exact same trim because I'm kind of anal about that stuff. And so it comes and I install it, and a little bit of it looked, just the color was off a little bit, but I thought it was the lighting. So I guess I assumed as well, right? It was just the lighting. So I get it all done, and my wife says, "That's not right, you should call about that." And I called the company, the mill company, right? And I said, it just kind of looks off, like it looks similar, but it's not right. It's supposed to be this cherry color. And she said, "Oh, they probably threw a bunch of oak in there too. They do that all the time." So then I had to rip up half the trim and reinstall the other trim. So to them, quality was not important, right? And it cost them more money because they had to give me free trim, and it cost me time because I had to uninstall it and reinstall it. So that's painful. That wasn't good at all. So there's also some resources. So if you have any desire to dig deep into project management, there's Project Management Institute, PMI. That's I have a project management professional certification. It's exhaustingly painful to get. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have to. But they have that body of knowledge of project management. So that's a good website. Projectmanager.com. It's actually a way that you can manage your projects online and have everything up in the cloud. But there's a lot of really good basic videos that they do about scheduling and the importance of risk management and things like that. So that's something to check out. And this Charles Kemper, my mentor, when I started as a project manager with him, the first thing he did is give me this book called The Goal. I'm not going to try to pronounce the guy's first name, but it's Goldrat is his last name. And it's actually a novel on project management. So I'm like 30 pages into it, and I'm thinking, why am I reading about your bad marriage? I don't get this, but it was excellent. I mean, it writes out the knowledge of business and project management in a novel. So that's, if you want a book that's not boring, that would be one. The rest are pretty boring. So what kind of questions do you guys have for me? So I'll give you a little bit more of my background. I graduated from Bethel University with a social work degree, so completely business related, right? I have learned over the years, though, that everything has to do with people and relationships, so it's been extremely valuable. And Karen and I got married, and I needed a job, so down the street from Bethel, where the eye care place is over there, was that Guidant Corporation. I started there as a data analyst doing some goofy computer stuff, and wandered down the hall one day and found a technical services area where they support clinicians and physicians and sales reps and implants of all the implantable devices. And I wanted to work there because it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So I did that for about 5 years. I was a people manager for a while. I was a project manager for about 5 years with that company. I spent almost 13 years there, and I got a master's in business, so then I had at least a little bit of credibility. And then I ended up getting my PMP. So I was at Boston for about 13 years, Guidant Corporation in Boston. They ended up Boston bought Guidant. And I've been at Medisys, which is a very, very small company, for about a year. So do you guys have any questions on what challenges I have or what life's like or anything? I'm looking at you. I'm just kidding. Do you? Okay.
So not your project management, but your people management
Yeah.
segment of life. So were you handling volunteers or paid people?
Paid. Yep.
Have you handled volunteers?
I have not handled volunteers.
Don't know how to do it very well.
No, we can talk later. Yeah, yeah, we'll do that. The other interesting things, there's different ways that project management organizations are set up. Some are projectized organizations where there's like a project team A, a project team B, and a project team C. Then there's a functional way it's set up, which I like a lot better. That's where all the engineers, all the smart people sit in a room. They're owned by a functional manager. And then there's a PMO, a project management office. And those are the project managers. I think it works a lot better, but the challenging part is you have to get people to do things for you when you're not their boss. It's easy if your boss says, hey, go do that thing, then you go do that thing. When the guy coming out of a room that has no authority over you whatsoever asks you to do something, it's much more challenging. So that's really where the relationship aspect is important. Another thing that I'm challenged with, I'll say it like that, is balancing the need to deliver on time with the needs of people. It's really easy for people to come in with a strong personality and push people down and get to the results, but guess who's left to do the next project? Nobody. They all quit. It's horrible. And it happens way more than you think it happens. So to really cultivate that selfless leadership of really valuing the people, because if you don't have a strong foundational group of people to do these projects, you might get one or two done, but then you got to start all over again. And that cycle is going to continue until you understand what healthy leadership is. So that's a challenge. Right now I'm in a projectized organization. There's about 13 of us, so organization's kind of a stretch, but I guess technically it's accurate. But I'm really pushing for us to do this functional thing because we have these siloed groups, and so all the good engineering here doesn't get talked about here. It doesn't get shared across, so it's very siloed. And it's been a pain for us. It's really challenging. So that's a little bit more on that.
Keep going.
Yeah.
So we've all done the thing where we jump into a project without planning,
Mm-hmm.
but on the other end of the spectrum, there's also the I'm just going to keep planning, or I don't know enough of the details, so I'm never going to start.
Right.
Like, is there a framework that you have for knowing now the plan is complete enough that we can go forward and wait for the bumps in the road?
A lot of times we have procedures that tell us what have to be planned on, so that we have all these little foundational pillars, and you just need to plan on those. More strategic things, that's back to risk management. We know A, B, and C, we're not quite sure about the rest. Do we go or do we not go? And that's, to me, that's the fun part, right? That's where you get to be all strategic and creative and figure stuff out. And actually, the company who bought Medisys is Medline. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. If you go to any doctor's office, there'll be Medline boxes everywhere. It's a global organization, $7 billion, and they're debt-free, which I've never heard of in my life. I forgot where I was going with that. What was your question?
Just about planning.
Oh, yeah. Yep, sorry about that. So their theory is when we're 80%, we go. Whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the way they operate. They're not going to, because they've seen that where you plan for 6 months when you didn't need to plan for 6 months. Because at least in the business world, if any day you're not in market is a lost cash. And the goal really, this book, it really kind of says, the whole point of business, it's nice when you help people, but everybody has a business to make money. I mean, that's the goal, is to make money. Right, correct. So it's back to risk management. So if you're in a project and you're trying to plan stuff and you're not quite sure if you're there or not, stand back, look at it holistically and say, what's the risk of us going forward? Are we all going to fall off a cliff and die? Because if that's the case, we're not going to do it. If I might bump my toe, we're probably going to go ahead. That was a good question, very good question.
So there's 10 pillars, essentially, that you're trying to build on, and if 8 of those are answered well, then that's 80%, or how do you measure 80%?
In your gut?
In your gut, okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about strategic, more strategic things, not necessarily, because where I work, we have a procedure that says there's this phase, and this phase, and within these phases are all the work that need to be done. So from a planning standpoint, it's pretty easy. It's when you actually start to execute and people leave or people get promoted and there's a space, it's managing that. Because ideally, my job shouldn't be hard at all, right? I mean, we should plan, we should execute, and it'll be done. I can go play Angry Birds for 6 months in my office. But that's just not the reality. I mean, every day it's about solving problems. It's not much about the planning or about, it's dealing with people and it's dealing with all the stuff that happens. It's that whole bumps in the road thing, right? I mean, a lot of times we go like, oh my gosh, there's a bump. We didn't expect it. We should expect it. That's what, 90% of what we do in business is solve problems. Because things always happen, always.
When you're doing more of the people management, what were your biggest challenges?
The people. It's the people. I mean, everybody's fantastic. They have different personalities. So I had one guy once who, he just wouldn't talk. Like, he was very much an engineer. He was brilliant. You walk down the hall and say hi, and he kind of shudders because he's not quite sure what to do, right? I mean, some people have that personality from an engineering perspective, and he wouldn't talk. If there was issues, he wouldn't bring them up. He finally brought one up after about 6 months, so he just let it sit there and boil and boil and boil for 6 months, which didn't help anybody, and frankly made his life probably pretty miserable for 6 months. But I think it's really just taking time to understand the people, and then you can form a strategy on how to work with them. So we have Medline bought Medisys, and there's a new CEO that came from Medline to Medisys, and this was just last week. And he's very much a servant leader. I'm really excited he's there. The first thing he did, he flew out here for 2 days, and he didn't talk about what we do. He talked about who we were. He met with his whole intent for 2 days was to come out and meet everybody, talk about their families, what they like to do, and that was it. And that's pretty rare. That most people don't do that. It would be, what's wrong, what's going on, how do we fix it, I'm going to come in and do my thing. So you can't undervalue the importance of people. That's a big thing. And then I've also had the feedback too, like, oh, you're paying too much attention to people. So there's that risk too, where you coddle somebody for 6 months and they're not getting what they need to get done, and so then there's that confrontation that can be extremely healthy that has to happen too. So there's really a balance of, we have to get this done, this is the date, as long as it's realistic, and here's you. There's a really, it's a constant balance.
How do you guarantee that your quality standards are met when you're over a group of people you have the kind of the phenomenon of, well, that we got that letter from corporate, but really we can't do that. How do you meet quality standards?
I haven't had to, because we have a quality department, even in this really small company. So the company I came from, the department I was in, was as big as this whole company. So there's about 120 people in this company. But even then, it's just such a core foundation we have quality engineers. They make sure everything gets done with the highest amount of quality. And then it's my job too to challenge. So if I get a protocol that comes across my desk and we're going to do this, and this, and I can see gaps in it, then it's my job to call that out. So quality is everybody's job, no matter what. It's just being awake to it as I look at different documents or talk to people.
So it's almost more about the culture that you make than it is about the...
Yeah, because there'll be huge issues if people outside of the quality department don't care about quality. Because frankly, most of those people are the ones that are making the strategic decisions. But the quality people, yeah, I learned even in this company, I had a few meetings without my quality guy, and he came over, and we have a good relationship. And he's like, you can't ever go into meetings like that without me. I'm not a quality guy. You know, I know what quality looks like and what it doesn't, but I'm not educated and versed in all of our quality standards at the company. So really, the biggest part of my job is to make sure I get the right people in the right room and help them make the right decisions. So I'm having to do a lot of other things, which is great because the company's so small, but a project manager usually doesn't do any work. They do the strategy and the organization and the getting the right people in the right room and doing follow-ups, portfolio management. So portfolio that's another thing that we're working on here is we have all these different projects, but there's not a view of all of them. So it's like we have all these little pipes laying around, but there's not a pipe that encompasses all the other pipes, if that makes sense. And that brings a lot of risk too, because some projects people are really bored on, other projects people are working 70 hours a week. We want to help balance that out.
How about for a much smaller organization, like a couple people trying to grow their capacity, so balancing, like, we can execute this much, like this is what we're capable of, we want to grow, but how do you plan for, say, bringing on new people, and you're going to have to take your current people and do some training,
Yep.
but then that's going to take away from your capacity because they don't have time to go sell or do or whatever your
Right.
work is. So how do you balance or plan for that growth and stay profitable or stay executing where you're at? But does that make sense?
Yeah, so for something like that, the PMI.org will help with more, and I can help you too. It's strategic planning. So you have to look at where you are and where you want to be, and then you have to walk through and figure out how you're going to get there. Like it's painstakingly boring sometimes to just go, we have to do this, and then this, and then this, and then the biggest thing is to understand what your risks are. So a big risk would be, we got 3 employees and we're going to get 3 more. So whatever we were going to get done in 6 months probably is going to take 8 months because it's going to be a lot slower. They're not going to be able to do all their work because they're going to spend 30% of the time training other people. And that's where that peace and that comfort comes from, is if you actually go through that process, that's when you can present to your boss or to yourself or to whoever that this is the work. We did our due diligence, and it's going to take this long, period. And here's why, and we can point out. And otherwise, you get bombarded with questions on, well, why wasn't it done in December? So did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. And if that's a personal thing and you want help with that, just let me know. Yeah. Any other questions?
It's like the most difficult project you've
It was a software project. So what Guidant did is we have these implantable defibrillators, right? So the next thing we did is created this little alarm clock that sits on the patient's bedstand. Every time they walk in the room, it uses RF telemetry to pull all the information out from the day and shoot it to a website, and the doctor can check on the patient from anywhere in the world. So it was this little latitude box thing. And there was definitely challenges with the leadership. So we took probably 2 years, and there was a project, and then we'd get partway through, and then the leaders would say, no, we're going to do it this way. So we'd start over, they'd rename it. We actually had engineers who had like a diagram in their cube, like this is where we started, and here's how the projects have evolved, so they wouldn't get confused. So I mean, it was just a disaster. They were changing things all the time. It goes back to that, do it right the first time, figure out what you want to do, have a really good justification on why you want to do it, so it's defendable, and then do it. That was horrible. I worked there it was 2 years and we never finished the project.
Did it finish in time?
No, it finished, but not in time. And then they went too fast, right? So software engineers are doing their thing, but they didn't take time to go back and look and make sure they had everything. So then when we released it, there was like, oh, got to fix that bug. And in the medical device world, you don't want to do that at all. And that's all public knowledge. Another thing that happened is they went way too fast. They found an issue, right? So then we had a recall, because these are in people's bodies. It's kind of a big deal. Kill you. And it was a small problem, right? It was like 0.3% of the devices in the field, but we're going to do what's right, and we're going to fix it, which was right. But they went too fast. Everybody gets updated in the whole world, right? With the programmers that they talk to the thing with. Then we realized we made it about 30 times worse. So then we had to go back to the doctors and say, it was little and now it's huge, sorry. I mean, that's embarrassing isn't a good enough word for that. So yeah, doing it right the first time, even if it takes longer. And it's in our nature to just kind of want to rush, at least me, I like to rush into things. But planning is extremely important.
You talked about a new CEO. I'm sure your company has probably multiple projects going on at once.
Correct.
What tools do you use to give him high-level visibility of status or progress? And are any of those tools transferable to NGOs, nonprofits?
Projectmanager.com is one that I'm pushing for. So we're a baby, this medicine company, right? I mean, it's existed for 10 years, but it was about 12 people. So we don't do that. There's some conversations, there's some Excel spreadsheets. That goes back to that we don't have that portfolio view that we control, and we can't go boom, 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 boom. Here's our issues, here's where we're on time, here's where we're slacking. But projectmanager.com, again, it's all up in the cloud, so you put in your schedule. And Microsoft Project, I don't know who's heard of that, Microsoft Project. It doesn't work well. It just doesn't. It's buggy, it changes stuff after you change other things. And this doesn't. And I've played with this for a few months, and it's rock solid. It's like $25 a month. So if you have small business and you want to start tracking projects, it'd be a great way to do it. NASA uses it, so I'm going to assume it's pretty secure, but I should probably verify that before I get in trouble. Yeah.
Nothing's secure.
Yeah, that's true. If NASA uses it, I'm comfortable that I can throw my schedules in there at least. So.
This might be kind of like what I was talking about before, but maybe in your people management, have you ever, or what would be maybe the first step to take in trying to duplicate yourself? Like you're the guy who's doing everything, and you want to get one or two guys to do everything you're doing so that you can step into that.
Bring them on 6 months before you need them. Yeah, it's just that training. And another big thing with something like that is super clear expectations. Like nothing ruins working relationships than when you don't give expectations, because then people think for months that they're doing the right thing, and the other person who didn't give the expectations is frustrated because they're not getting what they want. So to just have that, and I learned that painfully a couple times. But like when I started this job, the first thing I did with my boss was say, what are your, like clearly document and tell me what you expect from me, because then I can do it. It's usually not a capability problem, or you're not smart enough to do it. It's just they didn't tell you to go that way and went that way and no one's talking. And as you all know, I mean, communication in any organization, in any relationship is usually the biggest challenge. So communicating appropriately and cultivating that culture of giving each other feedback is important too, because I saw a lot of times that people wouldn't give feedback. If they did, someone felt like they weren't worth anything, and then they go to a different job. Or if you just don't take it, I learned, again, painfully, that my worth doesn't come out of my work at all. It comes from Jesus. It doesn't come from my work. So if you want to tell me that I didn't do something right in a meeting, that's okay. I can do it differently next time. Yeah, so that's another big lesson. That's not necessarily project management.
You talked a little bit about quality standards and like how you've seen that play out in your company that actually has a very clear like, oh, here are the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
How would you suggest to venture into that if you're wanting to incorporate quality standards into the work that you do or into an organization that you work with?
That's a good question. So I'm really only familiar with FDA type requirements. So is this for something you might be doing? I can help you dig into that. I don't have a good answer for you on that because I'm really FDA focused. That's what I've lived in for the last 13 years. But we can talk about that, absolutely. Oh, sorry.
You talked
What's kind of your ratio? I mean, because everybody has different personalities, and you have the doers and the players. And what's
Right.
kind of the ratio that you look for when you're putting a group of people together?
That's a good question. So it's not even really, it's not necessarily a ratio. It's whatever the end point of that meeting needs to be. So I'll look at whatever the result needs to be or what the output is, what we need to have done, and then I'll figure out who's best to come in there. So if we're having a quality meeting, I'm going to have the quality people in there. If we have a strategic decision to make, I'm going to get the most strategic person I can find in the organization who has the most knowledge about whatever that topic is. So it's really looking at what you need, where you need to be, and then finding the people who are going to help you get there the best.
Is there any criteria that you use to decide what projects or ideas to pursue and which ones not to?
So in my arena, it's all about how much money you can make on selling it, what the competition's doing, because from a consumer standpoint, if I'm a hospital and this company's doing these devices and you're not, I'm going to ask you why. That's all about the money for the most part. So if I have 4 projects and this one, each device I sell is going to get me $100 and the rest are 20 and 30. If I have limited resources, I'm going to go after the 100 just because it's more money. I think I'm out of time.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.